You guys ever see this game as a platform for humble bragging?
Oh yeah, totally.
Oh my goodness. Have
Oh,
you ever
no,
been
it's
to a
true.
youth
I
pastors conference? That's all it is humble bragging. Hello, everyone, and welcome this week to Irenicast. We are the weekly podcast dedicated to conversations on faith and culture. We're your hosts. I'm Jeff.
I'm Alan.
And that's all for today. Mona is unfortunately not going to be able to join us today. However, we do have a special guest co-host today, and his name is Dylan. So Dylan, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am 26 years old. I am currently living in Santa Barbara, California. I spent the last 3 years working for a campus ministry organization. And for the 5 years before that, I was going to school in San Luis Obispo. And right now, two interesting things about me is that I am recently a newlywed. I got married a couple weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I am in a transition, you could say, between employment. I think the more blunt way to say it is I am currently unemployed. So, there's that.
So, Alan, I don't know if it was the same for you, but before we got married, someone came up to me and said, I can't wait to hear your honeymoon story. This is just before we left.
No, dude. I've never heard that before.
No, really? I'd never heard it before.
That's creepy.
I'd never heard it before either. And I was like, what do you mean my honeymoon story? I haven't even had my honeymoon yet. And the guy was like, everyone that they have something on their honeymoon that happens that's like a story that they tell for the rest of their life. And I just kind of blew it off. And I was like, whatever. So Dylan, do you have a honeymoon story?
I do, actually. So we stayed in this hotel in Seattle that's right by Pike Place Market. And part of the hotel deal was that we got $50 towards room service. I've never stayed in a fancy hotel with bathrobes and stuff before. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to get my use out of this. And I'm going to wear a bathrobe around the hotel room. And so I put on the bathrobe and then we called room service, and the doc came at the room or at the door. And I thought, I wonder if it would be awkward if I answered the door in my bathrobe. I decided, no, it probably won't be that weird. And as soon as I opened the door, I was like, I made a big mistake. I chose poorly, and this is awkward because he's not making eye contact, and this is just not fun.
That reminds me of that Jim Gaffigan bit. Yeah, or he's like, here's the robe I rented. Alan, do you have a honeymoon story?
Yeah. We got married really young, and we were not 21 yet. And we went back to our resort that we were honeymooning at. And there was a big bottle of champagne that the resort had bought for us because, nobody in their right mind gets married before they're 21. And so that was my first drink, actually, of champagne.
You underage drinker.
I was an underage drinker on my honeymoon.
Sinner.
How long did the guilt last, Alan, after you took that sip?
None. I didn't feel guilty at all.
Oh, good.
Yeah, normally I feel guilty about everything. I even feel guilty right now for no reason. I could every moment of my life. But at that moment, I didn't feel guilty. It was just fun. And Jeff, your honeymoon story, I don't know if you've told it on the show before, right? But that's when you got the SWAT team called on you and arrested?
What?
Yeah, so we got married the day before 4th of July. And then we left for our honeymoon on the 4th of July that evening. At the time, my grandmother had a condo in a beach town in Southern California, and it was kind of a 3-level condo. So bottom floor was a garage, and you kind of dip down, and then you go up these stairs to get to the first floor, and then there's a third floor, which was the next part of the house where the bedrooms and all that were. My grandmother didn't live there, but she rented it out, but she also wanted the ability to go there during the summer. So basically, she only rented a room, but because she wasn't there, she kept the master bedroom locked and allowed the people that she was renting the room to, basically they had free range of the house for most of the year. We stayed there for our honeymoon. So we get there and no one's home, and we go up to the master bedroom when we're hanging out. And it's the 4th of July, so there's all these lights going on outside. And I keep going out in the balcony to see the lights because I think maybe, there's some fireworks going on, and that'd be awesome. So eventually I went out and I noticed that these lights weren't fireworks. It was a police helicopter. So I'm going out and I'm noticing that the spotlight is getting kind of closer, and a couple times it shines into the balcony that I'm standing on. And at one of the points I go out, I hear some rustling in the bushes. So I look down and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's who they're looking for. And as soon as I look over the edge, this cop with plain clothes and the little necklace badge comes out and says, you need to go to the front door. There's some officers there that are asking you some questions. So I come in and I'm like, meet me downstairs. The cops are at the door. And my wife's like, what? And I said, yeah, just, meet me downstairs. So I go downstairs. And when I get down to the stairs, I see that the living room, there's 2 coats on the floor and the front door is wide open. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's going on? So I go outside the door. And as soon as I step outside of the door, there's about like 10 cops. And there's like 3 cop cars and they're surrounding the front of the house. And as soon as I get out the door, they all put their guns up and they're like, put your hands in the air. And I'm like, whoa. So I put my hands in the air and I walk down the front stairs. And as soon as I get down there, I'm thinking they just want to get me out of the way and whatever. And they start cuffing me. And the second they start cuffing me, that's when my wife comes out and says, what is going on? So here's my wife, brand new, newly married. She knows I spent my time here in the summers as a kid. She's thinking like, what is going on? My husband is getting arrested. I don't know what's happening. And as soon as she yells, they turn around and they're like, put your hands in the air. And she puts her hands in the air.
Oh my gosh.
She comes down and then they cuff her right next to me. And we're sitting on the curb. We're both looking at each other like, what happened? My wife's thinking, oh no, he did something that he's not telling me about. And I'm thinking, did we hit someone and like accidentally drag him? And we had no idea. Like, I'm just freaking out. I have no idea why I'd be arrested like this. So then they bring the guy that lives there in. And I had known him since I was a teenager. And the cop brings him over and he looks me dead in the face. And the cop says, have you seen this man before? And he looked at me and said, no. And then walked away. And then they started like walking us towards the cop car. And I was like, no, wait. I was like, it's me, it's Jeff. And he looks at me, Jeff, oh my gosh, aren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon? And I said, yeah, didn't my grandmother call you and tell you we were coming? And he said, no, not at all. So what had happened was they got home, they heard us upstairs, they ran outside with the phone and called the cops. And there was already someone in the area who had been burglarizing homes. And they thought that was me. So all those times I was going out into the balcony and I was looking at the police helicopter, they kind of thought I was taunting them. So they didn't rush the room because
like
they thought
had a hostage.
Yeah, like they thought I either had a gun or a hostage or something like that. So finally everything was cleared out. And, the first time my wife got to use her new married name was on a police report. And then for the rest of the week that we were there, every time we come to the house, everyone's like, hey, happy honeymoon. Because like the whole neighborhood was just like staring at this whole scene unfolding in front of them.
So the moral of the story is when you get married, don't let on that you're younger than 21 and you might get perks. Mm-hmm. Don't wear a robe when you answer the door because it's super creepy. And call ahead to make sure the SWAT team doesn't get called on you.
Exactly. Right? That is what we're going to take from that. All right. Well, this week, because we have a guest co-host, we've allowed Dylan to pick the topic, and I think he really picked a good one. We're going to talk about mental health, and specifically mental health and being in church and ministry. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and hopefully you are too. See you on the other side of the music. So this week we are talking about mental health and ministry, and this topic in particular is kind of come from Dylan, because I think he has some personal experience with this particular issue. So Dylan, let me throw to you to kind of get the conversations going. So tell me kind of a little bit about your story and how this became a topic that's important to you.
Sure. So I think for a long time, faith and mental illness have been like inextricably linked in my family and kind of my story. So when I was 11, my dad, who was a pastor, had to stop pastoring because he was dealing with like a depressive breakdown, essentially. And so I was kind of like removed from the faith community that I was a part of at the time, because my dad and my family left the church that we were a part of. And my dad kind of stopped pastoring for a while, and he, had a really rough time where he wasn't working for about 4 or 5 years. And I remember experiencing a lot of things during that period. It's a very formative year for anybody, the 11 to 16-year-old years. Yeah, I remember thinking like, why can't you just get over it? Like, why can't you just get over being sad when I was in that time frame? And I remember, I guess, the abnormal ways that people who knew my dad would kind of like mention what he was going through. Like no one ever said like depression or mental illness or anything. They would always say like, we're praying for what your dad is going through or something like that. It was kind of like, Lord Voldemort's name that you couldn't say or something like that. There's that kind of stigma about it, I guess. So that's kind of where it started. And then I think my own personal journey with depression started when I was about 18, and it didn't come on suddenly or anything like that. It just, things that I like to do seemed less interesting. I had less motivation to go do fun stuff that I like to do, or to get schoolwork done, or to go surfing with my friends. I lived in Southern California, so that was often a thing that I did a lot. And I think I experienced the full brunt of depression when I moved away to college. And I was living in a house that was 3 or 4 miles off campus, so I was kind of removed from all the fun stuff going on in the freshman dorms, and felt very isolated and alone. And that's where I experienced the full brunt of depression, really. And that was a tough time. Felt very isolating, and was difficult to get through. I think one of the biggest hurdles, or one of the biggest things for me, was actually acknowledging and admitting that I was depressed and that there was something wrong going on in my brain. And that was like one of the the biggest first steps that I needed to take in order to figure out what healing meant, or to figure out what it looked like to get better.
So some of the people listening, me included, sometimes we think of depression and we just think of just being sad, but depression is more than that, right?
Yeah, for sure. It zaps like all your potential energy to do anything, really. There are bouts of sadness, but when there aren't those bouts of sadness, there's the long periods of not feeling really anything at all. Like everything feels very gray and numb, and it's hard to find things to be happy about or to look forward to.
How did that reshape your experience with your dad? Did it cause you to look back and look at it with a new lens? And then did you and your dad have conversations during this time about some of the details on what both of you were going through?
That's a good question. So it definitely made me look back onto what my dad was experiencing, and had this realization of like, oh, that's why he couldn't just get over it, because this is hard and it sucks. It wasn't until a few years later where I actually got to sit down with my dad and talk about what he was going through, or what we both experienced. And part of that was because I was afraid to tell my parents that I was experiencing depression, because I didn't want them to think it was their fault or anything like that, or their lack of raising me properly or anything like that I was experiencing this. And it's a very isolating thing, I think, both in the nature of how depression makes you feel, but also in, I think, how culture and church culture especially views depression.
What was your experience and how the church viewed that?
Yeah. So I think part of that was the whole Lord Voldemort name things. Like people were kind of afraid to talk about it or to mention it directly.
To say the word depression.
Yeah, depression or mental illness, or people didn't really even know how to talk about it, I don't think, and how to interact with somebody who was depressed or experiencing anything like that. And I think there's another end of the spectrum where people, I was never in a church that kind of said this explicitly, but some of the people I interacted with hinted at this, but that, if you're depressed, then it kind of hints at like some demonic type of possession, or even some friends of mine who went to a more charismatic type of church. When I would interact with them, I would feel kind of excluded from the way that they were experiencing God, because from my brief interactions with the more charismatic type of churches, is that joy is a very big part of the faith expression. And, because of whatever chemicals are going on in my brain, I feel naturally excluded from that.
So not only do you feel isolated from like your college community or those kinds of things, even in the church culture and atmosphere, sometimes the way that it's done is isolating to people who are dealing with things like that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's this, I think, sense that if you're following God and doing all the right things and saying all your prayers and living in a righteous and in good way, then you should be happy, and then you should be experiencing life to the fullest. For some people that works, and for some people that doesn't work.
Hulk Hogan Christianity, right? Saying your prayers, eating your vitamins, brother.
That's right, brother.
And I also think of, I went to a college that does, we talked about this earlier, Jeff, that does biblical counseling. And there's a lot of like verses in the Bible, if you would just pull them out and throw them at someone who's dealing with depression,
Mm.
things like just saying rejoice.
Mm.
Like, I don't know if it's worked for you or not. I can't say that I went through depression necessarily, but there was definitely a 6-month period in my adolescence. I don't know if it's normal for everyone, but I had like a rough 6 months probably in my 8th grade year. But just saying like be different,
Yeah,
to me that doesn't really work. You know what
yeah,
I mean? It's not
totally.
something you could just try to fix.
Yeah.
I can speak a little bit to more charismatic circles because that's where I grew up. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of spiritualizing that kind of thing. Like it's the spirit of this or the demon of this, and praying, go to the altar, and then. And I saw this happen with a lot of people. It created almost more frustration in the long run because they were told, you just need to do this. You just need to respond to this altar call. And then when nothing changed over and over again, then it heightened their depression because then they began to feel more and more like now God thinks there's something wrong with me. It was really heartbreaking to see that happen with a lot of people because in certain segments of Christianity, there's kind of a denial of anything having to do with psychology or neurology. And I think that's a little bit of the birthplace of what Alan was talking about with biblical counseling, is that all you need is the Bible, which is not true.
They call it nuthetic counseling. Yeah,
No.
sometimes medicine is important.
Yeah.
But for your story, you're saying that one of your first steps toward addressing it was just admitting that you were experiencing something, right? That you're experiencing depression to yourself. And you said it was kind of hard to admit that to yourself and your family at first.
Correct. It was pretty easy with admitting it to friends, and I think one of the very first preliminary steps, and that really there was a lot of good outcomes of that, but it was really hard to admit it to family. I don't think I told my family until halfway through college. It was after my second year at college was when I told my mom and my dad that I was experiencing depression. I mean, they've run through the gambit on what it looks like to address mental illness. So they were sad for me, not sad because they thought that they screwed up in raising me or anything like that. But they were very supportive. They were like, all right, we want to help you pay to go see a counselor, to get on meds if you want to do that. So they were really supportive once I finally did take that step and letting them know what I was experiencing.
So how did that work? You said that you went into ministry. How did that work in your ministry context? Were you still dealing with stuff like that? And was that received well in your ministry or talked about?
It was received well. So I had this kind of like big, crazy, when I was still in school, this big, crazy, like transformative experience where, there's in InterVarsity, we do like these conferences, and afterwards we get into campus groups and share about like what God was telling us. And I felt like God was pushing me to share in front of this group of like 40 or 50 students that, about my experience with depression, and that how it had led me to very dark places, and actually had contemplated suicide for a while. And in that process of sharing with all those people, it was very freeing. It felt like I'd shoved a weight off my back or something like that. In sharing and in being vulnerable with other people, I kind of like opened the space for other people to share like what tough stuff that they were experiencing as well. So that was like the most defining moments of my faith experience in my last 26 years of life.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was amazing. I still look back at it and get like goosebumps and think like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And so I've come to this place where depression has been obviously this thing that has caused pain and suffering in my life, but it's also been the lens through which I have experienced Jesus and experienced him the most powerfully and profoundly that I can articulate up till now. So it's this double-edged sword of being this thing that is painful and that I wouldn't wish on anybody else, but it's also the way through which I've experienced who God is and God's character. And I think it's become the lens through which I've begun to understand more fully what the death and resurrection of Jesus means, turning this image that's supposed to be used for suffering and death into this reason for hope and new life, which, is the cross and resurrection, right? And I got to experience that in my own life, which I am profoundly thankful for. Once I would like tell that story to people, whether it's bosses in varsity or friends, like they received it really well, and they would say, that's amazing, and we want you to lead out of what God has done in you in that area.
That is really cool. That
No.
the idea of standing up there and sharing something that you're dealing with, creating space for other people. I know I've seen Jeff, and in the ministry that Jeff has been a part of, was a big advocate for that. Being vulnerable in front of people allows people to be vulnerable as well and to talk about their own experiences.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that.
Well, and it's funny, it's that double-edged sword of community, where at one point it was lack of community, and then a certain segment of a community that wasn't included. Like, it didn't include your struggle in their language. It didn't include it in the way that they talked about it, which inevitably makes anyone feel like they're not included into that. And then it was that transforming moment where you found a community that gave you a space to use that language and express where you were at. So I think that's great. I think there's so many different levels to this issue. So what do you two think some of the things that the church could be doing better when dealing with mental health issues?
That's a good question. I think don't be afraid to refer people to counseling or to medication. Yeah, they've been profoundly helpful for me in my journey. Medication doesn't make, at least for me, it hasn't made depression go away, and everything isn't like unicorn farts and rainbows and puppies and anything and stuff like that, But one of the medications I'm on currently just helps me feel like I have energy to do stuff, and that it's a catalyst for adopting a lifestyle that's more that contributes more to mental health, exercising and doing hobbies, and eating food that is apparently good for your mental health and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. Don't be afraid to refer people. I mean, I went through my bachelor's degree and was at a school that preached nuthetic counseling, not psychology. And there was definitely this fear that the psychologists and the therapists and the medicine of the world is going to ruin your chance to respond to God by just trying harder and praying and reading. And they may not have always said it in those exact terms, but a lot of times they came really close to that. And there was definitely this kind of boogeyman, like they're going to prescribe sin to you. So be very careful about who you go see. And then in my master's degree program, I took some pastoral counseling classes. And basically it was like a 3-month program where they beat into our minds the notion that pastors are not necessarily trained psychologists, and we can see someone a few times maybe and help them work through a few issues. But there are some issues that you just immediately go to your resources and refer them to people that are trained, and you shouldn't be seeing someone for very long. So the idea that a church is a place where people who are dealing with mental health issues can go to be safe instead of like experimented on or just under one person's untrained hand, like trying to figure all their stuff out. But where a church can be a resource to a community for mental health is basically in referring people. And so churches stocking up on contact information and destigmatizing mental health, I think, is a really big thing. Another thing for me, like as a pastor and as a minister, there's always this sense that like you have to have a smile on your face 24/7, and your wife has to have a smile on her face 24/7. And like, if there's anything ever going wrong, it's like affecting your ministry and your faith and the church at large. And so there's this big pressure, I think, sometimes on ministers to just be this sounding board for other people's emotions. And so there's a lot of chances, I think, for people in ministry to develop habits that lead to bad mental health, whether it's like narcissism or just the failure to draw boundaries between yourself and what other people are dealing with. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of areas that the church can definitely grow in this regard. But at least saying the word mental health, the denomination that I belong to just voted this last week to adopt a pro mental health stance as a denomination. And as like token as that is, and just on the surface, that itself at least takes a step in the right direction to say this is something that's on our radar and this is something that we care about,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think along with that, what we talked about earlier, that idea of community, I think it's even more important for a pastor or someone who's in ministry to be transparent about that stuff. Because if we think in terms of community, honestly, a pastor is never really part of the community. Like they are, but there's that element of it, them being a hired hand. So there's certain expectations that are on a minister that aren't on everyone else in the congregation. And especially if you're following that old school mentality, like what Alan was talking about, I have to keep this smile on my face. You feel as though any vulnerability you have is to the detriment of the people around you.
Is that the old school mentality? Jeff? Like that's the old school traditional way of doing it.
That's what I was taught.
I like that because that means there's a different way of doing things, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I was taught is like you need to be what do they call it? Above reproach. You know what I mean? So even if you aren't really above reproach, just make everyone think that you are above reproach.
You
You know what I mean? And it's just so I hated it. I was always uncomfortable with that. And then when you're having difficulties, especially with which I did, I would say that I had a pretty, I don't want to say severe, but I did have a bout of depression early on in my ministry because I was having a lot of conflicts with my leadership. And I can't go to anyone and talk to them about it because my whole community is the church and I can't talk bad about the leadership. So it was at this weird stage where I was working during the day and my wife was working in the evening. And literally I just stayed at home all night and, went to the Jack in the Box drive-thru a few times a night and just kind of sat in the house and didn't do anything and just felt really crappy for a portion of 6 months. It was because there's that lack of community to really express where I was feeling.
And I think that community is a big part of what helped me get on the road towards getting better too. It's just someone that would listen to what I was experiencing and try to empathize and not have those like 4 Bible verses that they go to when they want to have someone experience joy or experience, rejoicing in the Lord or something like that.
So someone fixing you is not what you needed necessarily.
No, yeah. Weirdly enough, that's it's not what I was looking for when I was trying to tell people what I was experiencing. Yeah, I was wanting someone to listen and say, that sucks, and I want to be there for whatever I can. But yeah, so
maybe that's how the church should be more of. Is
yeah,
just being there for people and saying that sucks, and I'd like to be there for any way that I can.
Yeah, for sure. I have a friend who does like local ministry work, and he always says like the most powerful sermon ever preached is "Me Too," is what someone could say. So I kind of like that. It's a little corny, but I like it.
No, I like it too. I think that's like the center of the Christian gospel is that God empathizes with human beings, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
That we empathize with one another.
Yeah. Another thing about depression that has been one of the unforeseen positives is that I can identify with pieces of scripture a little bit more closely. Like when at the end of Mark's gospel and it says Jesus was sorrowful unto death, I can experience a little bit more like what he was experiencing. And I know that there's that sense that Jesus is God with us, the person walking in our shoes. Like reading the Psalms is like Psalm 42 and some of the other not so cheery and happy ones are very cathartic, and it's helped me identify with some pieces of scripture more intently, which has been again one of those unexpected bright spots in experiencing depression.
Yeah, we tend to do a lot of theological gymnastics to get around the fact that Jesus was still a human being.
Totally, yeah.
And that there's a lot of weeping in the Bible too, and frustration and shaking a fist at God, like one of the like Lamentations, right? A whole book dedicated to like, God, where's your justice?
Yeah.
Well, even the Psalms, like we pattern our worship in more. I'm assuming all of us are coming from more of an evangelical background where our worship experience was very much a part of the songs that we sang and that long place of just extended song time. But all the songs were like speaking about where we want to be. And rarely did we really sing songs and be honest about where we are, which I had a professor point out when I took a class on the Old Testament, is that the Psalms are like 1/3 of them are laments. Like part of our exercise, our spiritual discipline, if you want to call it, is to be honest about who we are and where we are and how we feel about God in the moment, regardless of how disruptive that is or how, unorthodox that is. But I believe that the Bible gives us room to speak those things, sometimes horrible things, to God.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're feeling. And that's an important part of the process to work through those feelings.
And, God forbid we build a sort of communal atmosphere where there's more than one range of expressible emotion, right?
That just seems hard.
Yeah, it does. It is. It does. Oh, you mean some people are happy and some people are not at the same time?
That's weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the last couple of years, I've kind of adopted this stance of in regarding to what you said, Jeff, about like experiencing the emotion that you're experiencing and doing it honestly. Like, kind of realize that like if I'm angry at God, God's not going to get his feelings hurt. He's he's like secure enough to continue to be who he is, and it's not going to it's not going to hurt him at all.
Yeah.
That's a really liberating thought for some
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people run around feeling like God gets offended at everything.
God's not petty.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's that idea of different places and people recognizing that, I may be sitting in a church service and singing a song about joy, but I can't sing this song right now. But I'm really thankful that there's someone here to sing it for me until I can myself. And I think there's really a powerful image and picture of what the church community can be. And unfortunately, often feels like it doesn't meet that standard.
And whenever I evaluate, church and ministry and ways of being Christians in the world, I always push it through the lens of preaching, because that's what I do. And that's like the most important part of church that I come from. That's like the gift above all gifts is, whoever's teaching is exercising the real church. I think it's important for ministers when thinking about mental health and thinking about just the different experiences of people in their congregation, that when we preach, we should be sensitive to those things. We should listen to our sermon before we say it through the eyes of people who might not feel what we're feeling at the moment, or who can't feel what we're feeling. It's tough to not be represented, in your own community and have no space for that.
Yeah. That's so true. I remember sitting in church and, feeling like I didn't measure up to what whoever was speaking, what they were saying about how to interact with Jesus and this complete joy or whatever. As I started to look at more different authors and people who could kind of speak my language, I began to relate more with the gospel. So I began to read books by Henry Nouwen and Richard Rohr, and more these guys that some people might consider out there or a little weird, or
or just really good.
Yeah, or really good.
Henry Nouwen tends to be the one that crosses all the different denominational lines.
Yeah.
And people don't really get offended by him.
Yeah, totally. There's this one author named Parker Palmer. Have you guys heard of him?
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay, he's a Quaker, but he's a really cool guy, and he speaks very candidly about his experience with depression, and in a way that doesn't say oh, this is what I was experiencing and this is how I got over it. He says instead no, this is what I was experiencing. This is how it sucked and how it was painful, and this is how it made me feel in the moment, like there was no hope and that I would never get out of it, which I don't think a lot of authors do.
Yeah, you mean so he didn't turn his experience into a formula that's universal for all Christians?
No, he didn't. Yeah.
That's not very Christian of him at all.
It's not. I don't think so. Yeah.
At least not evangelical.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you have the name of that book?
It's called Let Your Life Speak. It's a good read, and there's this other chapter in there that I think he really identifies with what I and other people that I've talked to have experienced with depression. He talks about this idea called the threat of resurrection, and how to someone who is experiencing depression, getting better and experiencing that new life in that resurrected state can seem like a threat. And I think to anybody who is faced with what resurrection looks like in their life, it is a threat, very much so. Because I remember when I was experiencing depression, I had this thought this is what I know. This is quote unquote comfortable, but it's predictable.
Yeah.
And to experience life outside of that seems very scary and very
inauthentic, and you're gonna lose yourself, right?
Yeah, totally. And feels like I can't face what's out there, because I can barely face this little experience of being depressed right now. But yeah, that is a great book. I recommend anybody to read it, and I think you'll get a lot out of it.
And I have a book also. It's not about depression. I said earlier that I don't know if this is mental health or not, but I'm just thinking of it, so I'm going to say it. There's a book about codependency that I read a little while back called When Pleasing You is Killing Me. And for anyone who has a hard time looking at themselves as someone who is worthy of love, or looking at someone looking at themselves and having crushing guilt, or sometimes feeling like you aren't doing enough to please the people around you. And this resource for me was a catalyst in my life to reassess how I looked at myself and how I looked at the world, and it helped me relate to other people in a new way. And especially in ministry, that gets really, really difficult really fast. If you're going to try to define yourself based on other people's expectations, that's a dangerous road to go down. So that's the thing that I would recommend to anyone when Pleasing You is Killing Me. I think it's by someone with the last name Clark, but I can't remember.
We'll figure it out, and we will definitely put that in the show notes. And I think that brings up a good point about mental health, is that we, obviously we're zeroing in on depression, Dylan, because that's been your experience.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is awesome to have like personal stories like that, which I think is kind of the point. One of the points of the podcast is to really, bring this whole range of what humanity looks like, especially within the sphere of Christianity, and recognize that it's not as narrow as a path as we'd like to believe. But I would say mental health in general, and we've talked to, and we've come back to this theme of community a lot. And when I was working in youth ministry and working with students, the ones that were the most unhealthy mentally were the ones that needed community the most. But because they had so many issues of codependency and whatever, like the gamut of all these things, they didn't fit into community. They were awkward socially. They had these difficult things, and the community itself wasn't trained on how to bring them in and how to work past those issues. So trying to help sometimes made it worse for those people, because it reminded them how isolated and far off they were. And that's such a difficult thing. And how does a church really accept the, to use a biblical metaphor, the widow and the orphan, when they're socially awkward and they don't know how to interact with people and all that kind of stuff? So how do we even bridge that gap from helping someone deal through depression, who on the surface, like Dylan, we've hung out, you're a relatively awesome guy, and
you are. I've met you twice, and I must say it was a pleasure.
Yeah,
Thanks,
easy,
gentlemen.
easy to talk to, easy to hang out with. But then, what do you do with a lingerer or a story topper, or you know what I mean? All those different social dynamics that really affect how community brings them in. And I don't know if I have all the answers to it, and I've tried over the years, but I think it takes more than one person taking that burden on themselves.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that was part of my isolating experience from communities, that I was like socially awkward, and like it took some very understanding people who wanted to get to know me and wanted to get to know my journey a little bit better. And so, despite the fact that I was socially awkward, they would say, let's go get lunch, let's go on a hike, let's go do stuff. I remember like a couple times where I'd say something weird, and people would be like, it's probably not the best thing to say in public.
Hey, we all have those.
Yeah.
We've all gone through I still do that constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that type of stuff was helpful. Yeah. People just inviting me into their lives, I think was helpful. And that's kind of like part of what you do as InterVarsity staff, is you train people how to share the gospel and be leaders on their campus, but you also train the awkward like Christian students on how to be friends with people. And so that was kind of my job for the last 3 years. And
that's good.
Yeah.
That's a very, very needed and good ministry. I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Something you said kind of triggered something in my mind. You said there were understanding people who invited you into their lives, and I'm thinking maybe as a church we need to help our communities be more understanding about mental illness, and maybe just education is where we start. We just from the pulpit, up front, classes, whatever, pamphlets, like at church, but just talking about it and educating people as to what's out there. Like maybe some people don't even have the ability to relate to others that they don't understand. So that's a good place to start.
No.
And not narrow our field to Christians. If we're talking about mental health, there are probably yeah, right.
We should love people outside of the church too,
or even like listen to them for some truth and teaching.
Yeah, listen to people outside of the church. Yes,
someone who's a good psychologist or a good counselor, bring them in. Help us understand how this works and bridge make those bridges with people outside of what we considered Christian, because it feels like a lot of evangelism is based off of being socially awkward or making people feel it's.
Maybe our segment should have been Jesus juking, because that's exactly what that is. Make you feel awkward by Jesus juking you.
Tell me your story so I can tell you where you went wrong and why you're going to hell.
That's right. That's a great idea. I would love to be a part of a church that invited a non-Christian psychologist to come in and talk about mental health. Like that's the kind of place I'd want to be.
Yeah, that would be great.
Because it is a severe problem. Like we can joke about it and stuff like that.
Yes.
But it is And not even just in the church, it's a severe problem in our culture. We do not know how to handle addiction, so we criminalize it. We do not know how to handle all kinds of different things, and we really don't even know how to categorize it.
So we stigmatize mental health instead of engaging it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They are our culture's lepers.
Yeah, so true.
Not that you're a leper.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and not to push back a little bit on what you said, Dylan, but I have a hard time that thinking and believing that you were socially awkward. I think there's a difference between socially awkward and having quirks. You know what I mean?
No, I was pretty socially awkward. Like it was pretty bad. I don't have a story offhand, but I can get you in touch with people that will verify.
And if you talk long enough, maybe we'll hear it for ourselves.
Yeah, you'll get there.
Well, in order to prove myself right, if that happens, I'm going to edit it out.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, that like in bringing up the thing about today's lepers, like when I see Jesus interact with people that are sick, or the lepers, or people that are possessed in Scripture, I identify like on some level with what they're experiencing. And this, I think the story that sticks out the most is like when Jesus interacts with the demoniac in, I think, Mark 5 is the version I'm most familiar with. But yeah, and just this guy who's been isolated by family, and people have tried to like fix him and restrain him, but he can't be held down because of this terrible thing that he's experiencing, which I think a lot of people would consider to be mental health issues today if you read that from a 21st century lens of what people in the Bible who are said to be possessed were experiencing. I think that's so true, Jeff, that people who have issues with mental health, or like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or depression, are kind of seen as leprous, and these people that society doesn't know how to deal with for the most part.
But we're learning, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of good work being done, and it's just access to that education and that knowledge that we need.
Yeah, totally.
So what, I know we've mentioned a couple books or resources so far that have been helpful. Is there anything else that either of you two can think of that we can kind of guide people towards to give them a broader view of mental health in general and how to interact?
I think we covered it all. We're done.
Yeah.
I think we solved the world's problems. Let's do it.
Yep. Boom. I mean, even if you don't feel like you need to go see a counselor, I think it's helpful to go see one.
That is well said.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And when I was working with university, anytime I interacted with a student and they were trying to talk about stuff going on in their life, I was like, I'm happy to talk with this stuff with you, but you should really go see a counselor. And I think it would have numerous benefits. But yeah, I think if you want to learn more about people's experiences with depression or mental illness, there's a range of books out there. The one that comes to mind is the one I mentioned earlier, Let Your Life Speak by Parker Palmer. And I think a lot of Henry Nouwen's books kind of like touch on what he experiences as depression. I don't know if he explicitly calls it brokenness and exactly
like that.
Yeah, I think that kind of articulates what depression feels like, or what it looks like to experience that a lot.
Did either of you ever get the line growing up in church that you're not supposed to have self-esteem, you're supposed to have Christ esteem?
I did receive that.
that's actually what I was talking about when I talked about I gotta know his name. When I talked about the book that earlier about people pleasing or codependency, that's what it was. You're not supposed to have any self-esteem whatsoever. Self-esteem is like sinful. You're supposed to have God esteem or Christ esteem. Your worth is located in Jesus and not in yourself.
Yeah.
And literally this book opens, like the first page is like, if you see a baby laying on the side of the road, you're going to go up to it and consider it worthy to be saved or like taken care of. Like when you look at yourself, how come you don't start with that predisposition to just look at yourself as like something that needs to be taken care of? And I was like, as stupid as that sounds, it was mind blowing for me. It's like, wow, like I should look at myself and want to take care of myself, to take care of my mental health or my relationships or the way I live in the world, instead of constantly seeing myself as, an object of wrath and sin and something that is completely unworthy. Like I need to begin at a different place, even though I can affirm some of the things that my church taught me it's very different to look at yourself as something that you can love, as opposed to just, I don't know, judge and avoid and beat down.
Yeah. One of the many negative side effects of the doctrine of total depravity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Well, unless anyone has anything else to add, I think that'll do it for our conversation this week. Dylan, thank you so much. If any of you listening have anything to add to the conversation, you can comment on the show notes at irenicast.com/19. There you can also find all the informational links that we talked about today to go a little bit deeper on this subject. And don't forget, every Wednesday we'll have our Facebook question of the week related to this particular topic. So yeah, we want to hear from you. On the other side of the music, we are going to be doing a little game of Two Truths and a Lie. This week, we figure a good segment would be Two Truths and a Lie, since we're getting to know someone new on the podcast today.
And it's a good youth group game.
It is.
I don't know if they did it in InterVarsity or not.
Oh yeah, totally.
So you're down.
Yeah, at the beginning of most Bible studies, this was like the game people used when they didn't plan for anything else. So it was good.
Yeah, that's how it works, right? I never did it in youth group, but every time I went to a youth pastors conference, they always made us do it at the table to kind of. In fact, most of the time I used my honeymoon story as one of the facts, saying I was arrested on my honeymoon, but I can't do that now because
you just shared it.
It's ruined.
Yeah. But now it's a.
You guys ever see this game as a platform for humble bragging? Like,
oh yeah, totally.
Oh my goodness! Have you ever been to a youth pastors conference? That's all it is humble bragging.
That's what youth ministry is.
That's right.
I would like to go to a youth pastors conference just to do like sociological observations.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that would be so fascinating.
Make notes the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay, so how this works, if you're listening and you're not exactly sure, each of us has come up with certain facts or non-facts about who we are. Two of them are true, and one of them is false. And the goal of the other host is to guess which one is the lie, and therefore knowing and defaulting to which two are true. So, Dylan, since you are our guest today, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Sounds great. So number one, I was once naked on Pacific Coast Highway. Number two, I took a tractor driving class in college. And number three, I was once bucked off a horse.
Immediately, I think you're lying about the horse because the naked story is hilarious. And you did, like, I'm pretty sure you attended a school that had tractor driving classes probably. So I'm going to go with number three being the lie. What about you, Jeff?
You know what? That's the way I was thinking too, is that being naked on Pacific. Yeah, exactly. Being naked on Pacific Coast Highway is very specific. And again, knowing the school you went to, knowing that they do have a pretty big ag program, the tractor seems likely. And so yeah, I'm gonna say that the horse is a lie and the other two are true as well.
So the lie was actually taking the tractor driving class.
Nice.
Oh.
You mess with us.
Oh.
That was good.
Yeah. They did have a tractor driving class at Cal Poly. I never was able to take it, unfortunately.
Was able to, so you really wanted to?
I did, yeah. I took a bowling class, though. That was fun.
They have a bowling class?
They
have a bowling class, yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if amazing is the word I'd use, but...
Listen, you know what? I still have never learned, maybe I should have put this on my thing, but I never learned how to keep score in bowling. Like, I've always let the computer do it. And when they have a computer, I never understood how it worked.
Jeff. Oh, Jeff.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm not a bowler. I'm sorry,
You
Alan, that I
bowl
was
before.
fatherless and I didn't have anyone teach me how to do man things.
Oh, you went there.
You went there. Hey, my dad had a bowling ball with his initials etched into it. So
Was he a part of
you have a point.
a bowling
awesome.
league?
I think he was when he was in college or something. They called him Guppy. I don't know. I don't know why.
Sounds like a bowler name.
Anyway, yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so my truth. I'm gonna go next, Jeff. If you can't tell,
Go for it.
My first is I've never square danced or gone square dancing. I don't know if square dance is a word. I want to skydive by 35, and I once body surfed while eating an In-N-Out hamburger.
Oh my
I think
goodness.
if there's any justice in the universe, then the last one has to be true. Because it's an awesome image. I'm gonna say number 1 is false.
Okay. I would initially go with number 1, but I think I have a vague memory of you going square dancing while you lived in my area, but I don't know for sure. What was the second one again?
Me, Jeff.
What was the second one again?
I'm your brother-in-law.
Well, see, I know you well. I know you well enough to know that
I talk about myself a lot. Come on, man.
Well, I know you well enough to know that if I choose the last one as a truth, then you might be slightly offended because you always have anecdotes about how people assume that because you're a bigger guy.
Oh, that's right. Oh my goodness. But before you do your answer, to illustrate what you're talking about, I did not eat a Twinkie for 7 years. 7 years. Because I was afraid because I was an overweight kid and I didn't want someone to see an overweight kid eating a Twinkie, right? I took a bite at a Christian camp of all places that 7th year, and someone walking by says, "That figures." Come on.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Man, talk about mental health. That's
I know, right?
That stays with you.
The struggle's real.
It is real.
Food and family dynamics are the worst, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so so what was the second one again?
So I've never square danced. I want to skydive by 35. I once body surfed while eating an In-N-Out hamburger.
I'm going to say number 2 is false.
Okay, so it is true that I've never gone square dancing. Vicky did when we were by you.
Okay, see, I knew it was something like that, but I didn't guess that, so.
I don't know. I come from kind of a, hopefully this isn't offensive to anyone, hick place up in the mountains where there's lots of square dancing, but I just never did it. You know what I mean? I do not want to skydive by 35. That's actually my lie, because skydiving scares the pants off of me, and I don't want to do it because I'm not going to put my life in the hands of some kid packing a backpack with a parachute. Like, just the concept of, hey, I'm going to pack this backpack that's going to save your life scares me. I don't know if it scares you. And then, yes, I did body surf while eating a hamburger because I was a youth pastor. And like we said, that's the kind of thing you do, right?
It's true.
I mean,
there are certain requirements to be a youth pastor. You have to do something.
I think it was
that's one of them.
Exactly.
It was a double, and I kept it out of the ocean for like 2 minutes.
Nice.
While I was body surfing.
So I need to understand this. What was the mentality like? Were you just like, I got to eat this right now, but I really want to go out there? Or was it a dare? Or it was just like...
No, it was one of those things where we were at a summer camp, and I was a youth pastor on the Central Coast. And we were talking in the bus about how awesome In-N-Out is and how awesome body surfing is. And I was like, you know what would be awesome? If you body surf while eating a hamburger. And they said, yeah, that would be awesome. I was like, well, you know, this is going to become a thing. And so I actually did it.
Okay, see, that makes a lot of sense. Like, the context helps make that, like, it doesn't seem weird at all that would happen.
Hey, the reason I end up saying really awkward things, and you can ask Vicky this especially, I say things without context all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, in like statuses on Facebook, people are like, ew, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget that context is important. Thank you, Steph.
But see, that goes back to quirks, like things that make you that everyone appreciates.
That's right.
Lovable, Alan.
And if they don't like it, then screw them.
Wait, so did the burger get all like soggy and gross after you caught away?
I think I ate like half of it before it started getting soggy.
No, that's still kind of sad.
Once it hit the water, it's no good. Not even I, Jeff, would eat that.
Wow, Alan. Honestly, though, like when I think of like things that are really sad, like someone dropping a burger or a little kid dropping their ice cream cone makes me sadder than more than anything.
We saw an older gentleman drop his Frappuccino yesterday. I don't laugh at people's pain very often, but like something about an older gentleman and his like Frappuccino with whipped cream all over the parking lot was like the funniest thing.
See, that makes me so sad. Like
he was sad. He was legitimately sad.
It's like funny because it's sad.
Yeah, he's like 55 years old and he's sad about his little sugary drink being on the ground.
Man, that seems like when I hear that or I picture that in my head, like my heart hurts. Like there's a little bit of it
because you laugh at people falling and hurting themselves
all the time.
For real.
I'm not a very compassionate or sensitive person, but when someone loses food, for some reason, I get so sad for them.
Wow.
Okay.
I understand that. That makes sense.
Amazing,
right? Especially a kid on an ice cream cone.
Oh yeah,
that's.
I just think that little kid didn't need that sugar anyway.
No, the first time my daughters do that, I'm probably literally going to weep with them in the middle of wherever we are.
You seriously don't think like welcome to the club? Like you just learned something about life that nobody can ever take away from you?
No, I have a soul if you believe in that sort of thing. Okay. All right. So here is my 2 truths and a lie. Okay. So my first one is I've never seen The Godfather. My second one is I've never been stung by a bee. And then my final one is I've never bought a lottery ticket.
Lottery ticket. So you've never done 2 of these things: stung by a bee, lottery ticket, or Godfather.
Correct.
Because you didn't have a father, I'm going to say you've never watched The Godfather because nobody instilled that value in you.
Wow.
Wow. That was supposed to be a joke. That was supposed to be a joke built off of a joke earlier.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
It's not a joke when
I'm going to feel
it's
guilty
home.
for a year.
Jeff, you should edit that part out and make Alan look like a jerk.
I'm going to make it the cold open and repeat it like 8 times in a row.
No, please don't. Dude, half the things they want to make cold open, I'm like blushing at. Oh my goodness.
We have more disagreements on the show about the cold open than I think anything else.
Yeah. I'm like, no, you can't say that opening up an episode. People I know are listening to this.
I'm going to say the lie is being stung by a bee.
Mine was The Godfather. And again, I'm sorry for making fun.
So you think that's the lie?
I think that's the lie. You have seen like an amazing repertoire of movies, but I don't know. Something about The Godfather. Well, it is Italian. I don't know.
What does that mean?
Wait, so I'm confused. I said I never seen The Godfather, and you think that I have? Or you're saying...
Oh.
Which is the lie?
I got it backwards. I thought you had never seen The Godfather. I think that was the truth. Oh. I'm going to say, what was the last one?
I've never bought a lottery ticket.
Oh, I don't think you've done that either. I'm going to say the bee sting.
Is the lie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. The lie is I've never bought a lottery ticket because I have.
Shoot.
Dang it.
Yeah.
You know what? You have these weird things, Jeff, where like I totally would have believed you'd never bought a lottery ticket in your life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't even know why I did that one time. I think it was one of those times where it was like, how there's moments where like it gets a ridiculously huge jackpot and you're just like, what the heck? And that's what I did it. I think that was the only time, aside from on my 18th birthday, one of my cousins bought me a couple scratchers.
I think on my 18th birthday, my friends sent me into a liquor store to buy them cigarettes and lottery tickets.
And I put the Godfather in thing there because I am a huge nerd for cinema and stuff like that, and I should have seen that by now. Yes. And I just haven't, and I don't know why. But it is on my list.
Beautifully magnificent film.
Yeah,
it's great.
I think it's because it's over talked about, and I don't know.
It's actually my New Year's resolution this year is to watch the Godfather films before the end of the year.
I'm getting a bag of chips next year. That's my New Year's resolution.
All right. Well, I think that will do it for us this week. Dylan, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything you want to like plug, a Twitter account, or I don't know if you have anything going on?
Before he does, I just want to say thank you, Dylan. It was very much a pleasure for me, and I enjoyed having you on here. And hopefully we can have you on the show again.
I would love that. Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me and listening to my story and letting me talk and ramble. I appreciate it. I don't tweet like the young kids do. I got a Facebook if you want to, message me on there. So
nice.
All right. So if you like what you hear, please, you can help support the show by going to iTunes and Stitcher to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your ratings and reviews really help the show so much by making it easier for others to find us on those platforms. And contact us anytime on our feedback page at irenicast.com/feedback. And there you'll find all the ways you can contact us, like us, follow us, and, basically stalk us. So for this week, I'm Jeff.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Dylan.
Thanks for joining the conversation.